Welcome, friends. My name is Alan Ewing-Merrill, and I serve as the Executive Director of the BTS Center, and I'm so glad to welcome you all to this gathering. The BTS Center is a private operating foundation located in Portland, Maine, building on the legacy of the former Bangor Theological Seminary. Guided by the vision of human hearts renewed, justice established, and creation restored, the BTS Center seeks to catalyze spiritual imagination with enduring wisdom for transformative faith leadership. And we do that by offering theologically grounded programs of continuing education and spiritual and vocational formation, including workshops and retreats, learning cohorts, public conversations, and projects of applied research. Today, we are so glad to welcome you to this event, a Fireside Chat with the one and only Steve Garnaas-Holmes, whom I will introduce in just a moment. Today, I'm joined by two of my colleagues, and I want to introduce them very briefly. First, Nicole Deroff, who serves as our program director here at the BTS Center. Everybody wave to Nicole. Nicole will be managing the chat box and the comments. She'll be taking care of any security issues that come up. They won't, we hope. And making sure that everything goes smoothly. And also Kay Ahmed. Kay, you can wave as well. Everybody wave to Kay. Kay is our operations manager here at the BTS Center. She's recording the event and managing the technology and other details behind the scenes. So thank you so much for being here, Nicole and Kay. On behalf of all of us who are part of the BTS Center team, I want to welcome you to this gathering. It's great to see so many of you here in the Zoom room. I know some of you participate regularly in programs of the BTS Center, and we're glad that you're part of our circle of friends. We're glad that you're here today. It's also wonderful to see some new faces here as well. So a special welcome to those of you who may be joining us for the very first time today. And we're also glad to welcome those of you who maybe have found us on Facebook Live. Glad that you're with us as well. So now I'm going to invite Nicole to say hello and lead us in kind of a round of introductions. Nicole.
Hello, friends. Thank you, Alan. It's a pleasure to be sharing this midday conversation with each of you. So I invite you, if you feel comfortable, to use the chat to show up in this space and get to know who else is here with you. So first, if you could chime in with what geographical location are you logging in from today? Go ahead and put that in the chat. What geographical location are you logging in from? I'm seeing Massachusetts, several people in Maine, different parts of Maine, New Hampshire, New York, Wisconsin, Washington, D.C. Welcome, welcome. We're so glad each of you are here with us. Second, I am wondering if you would put in the chat something meaningful to you that's within your line of sight right now. Something meaningful to you that's within your line of sight right now. What are some of those beings or items? We got a shout out for a wife, a friend, a statue of St. Francis, river outside, blue sky and trees, a candle that has an important purpose, photographs, an obnoxious dog, beloved, obviously. Lovely. Thank you for all of these answers. Mom's teacups. And last but not least, I invite you to share, if you're someone who celebrates the season of Advent, what is something about this season that you appreciate? Something about Advent and this season that you appreciate. Thank you. Steve chimed right in with waiting. We'll get to that a little more, I'm sure. Pregnant possibilities, the call to patience, candles in the darkness, preparing, expectation, family gatherings, and so much more. Thank you all for showing up in this space, for being present with those of us at the BTS Center and with one another today.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And now I'm delighted to introduce our guest, my conversation partner for this fireside chat, the Reverend Steve Garnaas-Holmes, who's joining us today from his home in Wells, Maine, just a little south of Portland, where I am. Steve is a pastor, poet, musician, and retreat leader, and maybe he's best known as the author and curator of the popular blog Unfolding Light, where for almost 20 years he's been sharing nearly daily reflections rooted in a contemplative, creation-centered spirituality, often inspired by his regular practice of walking in the woods. I have a feeling that many of you are here today because you have encountered and been influenced by Steve's writing there on Unfolding Light. In poems, parables, psalms, and the odd weather report, those of you who read will know what I mean, Steve invites readers into a spirit of presence, compassion, justice, and delight. Steve says, Unfolding Light is for anyone who wants to be a part of God's healing of the world. Recently, Steve added a lot of things to his website, including some worship resources and original music that Steve has been writing for 4 decades or more. So Steve, my friend, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It's a treat to be here. It's fun.
I agree. Looking forward to this.
We should do this more often.
We will. I have a feeling. So thank you for saying so much. Thank you so much for saying yes to this invitation. I always enjoy talking with you, and I'm so glad today to introduce you to, I don't know, 40-ish of our closest friends to share this conversation together. So here we are in the season of Advent, the Christian season of Advent, a season of waiting and anticipation and preparation for Christ's birth. 2 days ago, many churches lit 3 candles on an Advent wreath, the third Sunday in the season of Advent. And Christmas is now just 11 days away. That may be a little hard to believe, but it's true. So you've been writing a lot of Advent reflections, sending them out, posting them on social media. I've been reading them every day. And I wonder if you could start by just talking with us a little bit about this season. What are you thinking about Advent, maybe in this year in particular? And what are your thoughts about how Advent sets us up for the 12 days of Christmas?
You know, one of the things that I appreciate, I think Advent might be my favorite season. Partly because of the darkness. In the secular world, there are no 12 days of Christmas. There's about the 45 days of Christmas from Thanksgiving till the evening of December 25th, and by then it's all over and we throw away the tree. It comes back for a little curtain call on New Year's Eve, but it doesn't really count. So the 12 days of Christmas that are December 25th through January 5th are so countercultural. And one of the ways that Advent is countercultural is that not only is it not Christmas, but it's a season of darkness. I think it was intentional that the early church placed Christmas around the winter solstice. And there are 2 things about the darkness that are significant to me. One is that it is into the darkness that God comes. A lot of times, when there's a disaster or a loss, people will, during December, people say, "Oh, that just so totally spoils the Christmas season." But that's the reason for the Christmas season. Jesus represents God's willingness to come into the dark, rough, ugly, not very nice places in our lives. And so we do things like light candles that only work if it's really kind of at least a little bit dark. They disappear in the daylight, but the darker it is, the more we can see those. And we over-decorate our houses with lights, but I think sometimes just a little light or 2 is more in the spirit of Advent, in which we're paying attention to this light that shines in the darkness. The darkness can't overcome it, but it's still part of the conversation. The other thing about the darkness of Advent is not only that it's the time when God comes to share with us our sadness and our grief and sometimes even our despair, and these days our burnout and our just weariness dealing with pandemic and politics and the climate, and it's just like one thing after another. But another thing that Advent does is introduces us to the blessing of darkness. We're so hooked into this notion of dark and light as the equivalent of good and evil. And part of what Advent does is says, you know, the darkness is also good. That the darkness is the place where seeds grow. That when in the womb, where the child is developing, is dark. And in our sleep is when dreams happen. And in the midst of the unknown is the way that God appears to us. And it sort of gets us away from thinking light is good and dark is bad. And it's true that we refer to things as dark days. And there is something about darkness that feels unwelcome to us. And the paradox is that in Advent we say, and it's also a blessing. There's something powerful about that. When I look back in preparation for this, after you and I talked, Alan, I went back and looked at some of my Advent poetry. I must have 50 or 60 poems that are rooted in Advent. And man, a lot of them are about the darkness. But I think that's part of what I like about the season is that it invites us into the paradox of accepting, not just enduring, but actually blessing the darkness. And the darkness itself is a blessing for us.
Amen. I so appreciate that, Steve. Reclaiming the gift of darkness, sort of moving away from those binaries or those polarities, darkness, bad, light, good. What an invitation for Advent. So you mentioned you have 50 or 60 poems about Advent. I wonder if you have a piece or two that you'd like to share right now.
I bet
what do you
I
got?
Can pull up here. Let's see. What do we have? You know, it's interesting. The first one that comes to me here is I must have, I don't know, 10 or 12 poems about or somehow reflecting the Annunciation. And here's one called Annunciation. Walk alone in your deepest darkness. Let the night lean over you. The great abyss open its eye to you. Let the house of despair and loneliness fold its arms around you. Do not be afraid. This whole darkness is inside of something. Even here, so far from the road, with pieces of yourself wrapped around you, you have found favor with God. The voice only whispers, so hard to hear in the dark. God wishes to be in you, wants to slip into the shawl of your sorrow and wear it serenely, longs to breathe in you in peace, in peace, in peace. A womb within the grave stillness stirs, and here, as if this were the very east, a wound in the darkness bleeds light.
So good, Steve. Thank you. So many images. And it's wonderful to hear you read them.
You know, it's fun.
You know, I read them from a screen or whatever regularly, but to hear you reading them is a whole different experience. I'm going to try to listen for your voice now when I read your
do that.
When I read your
you
pieces.
Know, the fun thing was I mentioned as we were getting set up that I did a poetry reading a couple of weeks ago down in Maryland, and because a lot of the people there probably were there because they'd heard about Unfolding Light, I intentionally chose a lot of poems that were really old so that they were poems that they hadn't heard. So I read through these poems that I wrote 30 years ago or so, and that I didn't remember. It was really cool to read my own
poems. Who wrote
poems
this thing?
The first time, like, whoa, where's this going? Yeah, it was pretty fun.
That is great. Like pulling out pieces from your own personal museum. Very nice.
Yeah. Go back and read some of your old sermons, and sometimes you go, oh, I can't believe I said that. And sometimes you think,
yeah, that's a little scary.
But you also see the good stuff. You go, okay, that works.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to hearing a few more pieces as we continue on.
Okay.
An invitation to those of you who are with us here in the Zoom room or on Facebook Live. If you have a question of your own, feel free to pop it in the chat box, or if you're on Facebook in the comments. Nicole's going to kind of monitor those. And as we have time, we hope there'll be an opportunity to ask a couple of the questions from the audience, if you will. So, Steve, I have a feeling that it's true in this space as well that many of the folks who are gathered with us today know you best from Unfolding Light. What a labor of love that must be. I'm kind of in awe when I think about it, actually. So I'm wondering if you could give us a little peek behind the curtain. How does this come together nearly every day? I'm thinking about the discipline that must require of you. So what's the daily rhythm of that discipline like? What does it take to be faithful to that? And what does it give you in return? And maybe even what are your hopes for this Unfolding Light project?
It's people speak of it as this great discipline, this hard thing. And for me, it really is just about 98% fun. I started back in 2001 when I was a campus pastor at the University of Billings in Montana, University of Montana in Billings. And I would email the people in the program with news and stuff and throw in a little thought for the day. And as the year went on, it became more of a thought for the day and less news. And by the end of the year, it was not daily, but it was several times a week. I'd send out a little something, mostly a thought for the day. Billings is up against these big sandstone bluffs on the north side of town. And I would put a little thing in and they're called the rims, the rim rocks. And I would put in a little thing about the rims today, just inviting people to look up and see how the wind and the rain and the sun and the snow would paint a different thing on this big sandstone palette every day. Well, when I left there and moved to New Hampshire, a couple of the faculty and staff said, "You're going to keep doing that?" I'd never thought of that. So when I got to New Hampshire, I started this up and gave it a name. And I just decided I'm going to do this every morning. I'm going to send out a little reflection. And I used to do it the morning of. I would actually get up and walk in the woods and then come home and write a poem and hit send. And two things changed that for me. One was that a lot of times I found myself walking in the woods, and I wasn't walking in the woods, I was writing a poem. And I wasn't really paying attention. I was sort of thinking about what was going to be in the poem. So I switched it around and decided to walk after. The other thing was I hadn't expected this, but there were people who said they used it regularly in their morning devotions at 6 o'clock in the morning. I thought, oh, well, I'm not going to get up in time to go for a walk and write a poem and make it worth sending out all before 6. So these days I actually do it the night before. And it's there are times when I frequently say, like I have done some Saturday nights when I go, oh, Saturday night, I need to write a sermon. And I tend to work things in my head. I haven't written a sermon down for 25 years, maybe. I just work them in my head. The poetry involves more actual writing, although sometimes it kicks around in my head a lot. But except for those times when I feel like it's bedtime and I go, oh no, I have to have Unfolding Light tomorrow morning. It doesn't feel like a pressure or a burden. It just feels like how I process things. And, people ask me, how long does it take to write a poem? And I say, honestly, literally, and not trying to joke around and be funny, 68 years. Some poems just fall in my lap and I'm going, wait, let me write this down. And other poems, I have a word or an image or a question or a feeling, and I start writing and I have no idea where it's going to go. And some of them come together pretty easily, and some of them have been sitting in the file for years. It's not quite right. There's a lot of polishing. I'm not ready to hit send yet. But I also have a couple of them that are ready to go, that are sort of stacked up there, my little secret. Sometimes I go, oh, I don't know, just pull one out of the ready to go file But yeah, sometimes in the process of writing one poem, two or three more come to me. So I'm way ahead of the schedule. For me, writing poetry is very much like prayer. They're very closely related. I've done retreats on writing as a prayer practice. Um, partly because so much of, for me, writing is waiting for the word. And again, it's sort of that Advent time when you know something is coming, but it's not there yet, and you're waiting for it. And it's not that there isn't a word. There's a word or a phrase or a line or a poem. It's just that I haven't seen it yet. To me, by the way, that's what hope is. In Advent is in this season of hope. Hope isn't wishing that something is about to come. That's just wishing. I hope our team wins the game. That's just wishing. Hope is an act of trust in what's already there that you haven't seen yet. So a couple months ago, I planted daffodil bulbs. That to me is hope, because I'm hoping they will come up in the spring, which means I know they will. I know that there's this process of life going on in those bulbs. I just can't see it. They look pretty dead to me as I stick them in the ground. And the first thing that happens is that it gets cold and gray, and then there's 3 feet of snow and it freezes over and it doesn't look like daffodils at all. To me, that's hope, trusting in what is there. You just haven't seen it yet. Poetry is like that for me, and prayer, in that I'm opening myself up to whatever, in terms of poetry, whatever words get strung together. And in prayer, not so much words, but just awareness, just presence that's given to me that I have to wait for. And so there's not a whole lot of like fishing through the thesaurus looking for the right word. It's more like just sort of being open and waiting for the right word to be given. And so a lot of my poetry comes to me in those odd moments when I'm in prayer or at lunch or walking in the woods. This morning, here you heard it here first. This morning in my prayer time, there's a lot of turkeys in the neighborhood, and I was praying and looking out the window and watching these turkeys, and this image came to me of prayer, in which I'm holding out my hand, reaching for something, and unexpectedly a great bird comes and lands on my arm and won't leave. Now, someday that might turn into a poem about birds or about prayer or about grace or something. But there's this image that just kind of sits there. And I wait. It's like a Christmas present. I wait for it to unwrap itself. And sometime it might sort of happen in my unconscious, and sometime I might sit down and pull out a pen and a paper and say, okay, what are you going to do with that image of the bird, and work it. It's different every time.
Thank you, Steve. That is really inspiring. That sense of active hope and trust and waiting for the word to come.
Yeah.
And it will, and trusting that it will in time.
Yeah.
That'll preach. You probably have preached that. You just did preach that.
It's kind of the only sermon I have. I only have 2 or 3 sermons. I think every preacher
that's the same
like
for all
that,
of us. Mm-hmm.
Jesus only said about 4 things. God is love, trust God, love your neighbor. God is love. Did I leave anything off? Yeah, thinking about Advent and hope, everybody I know is tired and maybe a little bit depressed and moving toward burnout. And the Advent scriptures, if you follow the lectionary, they're jarring. The very first Sunday of Advent, when you turn the corner from Thanksgiving and say, whoa, Advent already. Okay, let's do this. And the very first thing is that Jesus starts talking about the end of the world.
Right.
And it just feels like, what? That's not Christmas. And I think of the world in which Jesus was talking to his followers under Roman oppression. And I think about the world in which Paul is writing his letters and the gospel writers are writing their stories about Jesus, in which the temple in Jerusalem, if it hasn't already fallen, is about to fall, and they can see it happening. They are living in what they experience as the end times. And I think that so speaks to us now. I have actually recently begun to seriously consider the possibility that these might be the end times. Not necessarily the next decades, but not the next centuries. That within a generation or two, it's possible that we actually will wipe out the human race and a few million species with us. And I think so. So how does Advent figure in that? And it so speaks to this hope that goes beyond that and says, for one thing, the next generations are going to be good and beautiful, even if they are our last. In the same way that the last day of your life can be a beautiful day. It doesn't have to be a day of dread just because soon you're going to die. I think about that now in retirement. I'm more, and especially with the pandemic, more aware of my mortality. When it first hit, I was preaching to my people, you're going to know somebody who dies from this disease. and I thought about literally updating my will and getting my affairs in order. And to me, Advent speaks to that sense of the end of what we have always known, and takes that fear and sadness and says, yes, but it belongs to something bigger. Earth will go on if humans wipe ourselves out, and some other species will evolve, and a few million years from now, there will be green forests, and there will be living creatures, and the Earth will go right on for another few 100 million years. And the realm of God will do the same. Even if we wipe ourselves out, even if America falls for fascist government and we don't turn the corner on climate change, or we turn the corner on climate change and choke ourselves with plastic. I mean, there's lots of ways in which we could despair. I think what Advent says is, yes, and there's a bigger reality, and it's here already. There is this love that we belong to that so completely includes all that pain, that even if we think of ourselves as being in the end times, still the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. And I don't get that. It's like, well, yeah, if we totally destroy the human race, isn't that sort of the worst possible thing? And God says, oh, no. And my grace is so much bigger than that. You just wait and see.
It makes me wonder, Steve, I really appreciate that. It's thought-provoking for sure. It makes me wonder what kind of practices are needed for individuals like me, like all of us, to move through the existential angst and anxiety of that to get to the place that you're naming. Because to me, it's not as easy as just saying what you just said, which was beautiful and true. But there's this incredible anxiety that comes up when we think about what this next century might be like, climate devastation and choking in plastic and all of that. So what kind of practices do you think, and this is totally off the cuff, can help us to cultivate that spirit where we can get where you just invited us to go? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah. There are, just off the top of my head, 2 or 3 things that occur to me. And one of them is the old-fashioned stuff of the old traditional spiritual disciplines, prayer and read scripture. I read scripture pretty much every day, and I do the whole lectionary thing. I do an Old Testament and a Psalm and an epistle and the gospel. And one of the things that does for me is it places me in this 3,000-year-long history of mostly suffering and anxiety. There's very little of the scripture that comes from a lovely place.
Right.
Of the places that scholars can locate that are named in the Bible, 3/4 of them are out in the desert. It's in the hard places. And as I read the scriptures and the Psalms that are full of so much lament and sometimes just downright panic, it places me in this long tradition of a whole a host of witnesses, this communion of saints, all of whom say in unison, yeah, it's hard, hang in there, we've seen it before. And I read the Psalms with people who went through the exile and the Exodus and the Holocaust and slavery, and they're all a part of that. And I go, oh, okay, they know more than I do here, and that helps. A second thing that really, again, Advent helps with is marking time, paying attention to the seasons. I think one of the geniuses of the liturgical year is the way it invites us to mark the time, and it's intimately woven both with the church year is intimately woven together both with the life of Jesus and also the natural cycles. And
Right.
so that it invites us, like Jesus says, to consider the lilies, look around, see what you see in front of you, which is actually a third thing. But the thing about marking time, like lighting 3 candles, and I don't get to light the fourth one till next Sunday, is it helps me center in the present moment. When I'm feeling the pressure of what might happen, I've left. I've
Right.
gone into this imaginary future that I've already decided is going to be bad, and maybe it's not going to be bad. Maybe there are wonderful things happening that I haven't seen, and one of them will, by the butterfly effect, take over and change things. and so marking time helps me stay in the present. The thing I just mentioned in passing, the third thing is paying attention, looking around. If you've ever worked in counseling with somebody who is having a panic attack, or somebody who's been severely traumatized, sometimes the simplest way to help them is simply invite them to look around. Name
Right.
5 things you can see. How about 4 things you can hear? How about 3 things you can feel, you can touch? Okay, I see a little red stool on this desk that my phone is propped up on. I see a lampshade. Just whatever it is helps us root in the wonder of being alive and being in this present moment, no matter what's coming next. And the fourth thing is, it sounds abstract, but I think it's significant, and that is contemplating your death. The old monastic thing of sleeping in your own coffin. Jesus's ministry, his spirituality is one that starts with loss and sorrow and goes from there. A seed cannot bear fruit until it dies and falls into the earth and buried, and then it bears much fruit. So he starts the Sermon on the Mount with, "Blessed are poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn." He starts from this place of loss and grief and lack of control, because that's what creates our despair, this despair that we can't fix what's coming next. And Jesus' spirituality says, "Oh, that's right. No, you can't fix it. You are completely powerless. So get over that. Get used to that. And then in that powerlessness, out of that grave, discover the power that you have to be alive, to love, to forgive, to appreciate beauty, no matter what's going on." And that seems to have been what kept people alive and well in the Holocaust, in concentration camps. Viktor Frankl did this great work in discovering that some people actually thrived in concentration camps with death all around them. How did they do that? They had this sense of purpose in being present right now and loving people. And yeah, they might get fried in an oven tomorrow, but that's tomorrow. Today, I'm going to love people. And it was because they were aware that death was imminent that they finally could say, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to die sooner or later. Before I die, what choices do I want to make?" And now my focus is on, how do I want to live right now, not what's going to happen later. That helps me both deal with the despair of the future and also dial down its bleakness. That helps me trust that, the future isn't all that bleak. There's so much hope and so much possibility here. Maybe it'll turn out just fine. And then that gives me courage it becomes this self-feeding cycle to let go, which gives me more courage to let go, which gives me more courage to love, and it feeds itself.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Let's see if we can, Nicole, I wonder if I see that people are putting some stuff in the chat. I wonder if there's a question that you want to pull out from folks who are listening in.
Yeah, please continue to put comments or questions in there. I think actually Steve went really naturally to the places that people were wondering about. And I'm sitting here thinking about the culture shift that is so desperately needed in our time, and your thoughts on the role of arts, poetry and music and story in that needed culture shift.
You know, human beings are symbolic creatures. We live by and think by symbols. We've fooled ourselves for the last few centuries into thinking that we are rational creatures, and we're not. And so much of politics that you see right now is just sheer emotional reactivity. There is no rational thought in it whatsoever. And part of what the arts do is acknowledge that the real power in our lives is mostly unconscious. And what the arts do is move in that realm in ways that logic not only can't understand, but also can't mess with. And so when we sing a song in the face of terror, something happens in our psyche that we can't create or define or explain, and that the terror that faces us can't diminish. We just keep singing that song. The power of Jesus's parables is that they're in these images that we can't make sense of, and they just sit in our unconscious and lead us in ways that we need to be led in, that our rational minds can't do very well. And it's in there. So we think, for instance, of, you know, earlier I said there are no no scriptures that come from a happy place. And somebody will say, well, what about the 23rd Psalm? 2 sentences in, the 23rd Psalm leads us right into the valley of the shadow of death. And that's in there somewhere. So when we recite the 23rd Psalm and think about the still waters and my cup runneth over, right beneath the surface is this awareness that it's about death. It's not about everything being nice, but it's in our unconscious. We're not actually thinking about that. And I think the arts are ways of speaking to our unconscious in ways that our rational mind can't mess up. And that's why it has such power. And that's why it's not politicians that certain people of a certain political persuasion want to censor. It's books. It's artists that look at every repressive regime ever. The first people to get in trouble were the poets and the songwriters and the artists, and they were told, here's what you need to say, and the ones who said, sorry, I'm not saying that, got in trouble, because it has power, and its power is unconscious. And that's so much, by the way, of the power of our religious traditions. You can explain Jesus all you want, but in the end, what you do is you gather with some people, some of whom are your best friends and some of whom are complete strangers, and you say, here, this is the love of God. Eat some. I'll eat it with you. And it'll be in both of us now. Weird, huh? It's like we're all part of the same thing. Cool. And we have lots of explanations at the Eucharist, but at the root, at the bottom, it's just like, let's eat together. Let's light a candle. Let's throw this baby in the water.
Yeah, power of ritual too.
Yeah,
Nicole, thank you for that. Thank you for that question, and thank you, Steve. So we're running out of time, which is always sad because we could talk for much longer, and we will another time. Here's what we're gonna do, Steve. I wonder if you could share another piece, and then I'm gonna invite Nicole to come back and just share a little bit about some things that are coming up, and then Steve, I wonder if you could offer a blessing to end our official time together. We will end at 1. But Steve has agreed to stick around a little bit for those who might want to linger for some conversation, Q&A. So we'll stop the recording and Facebook Live and all of that, but just kind of linger for conversation. So Steve, do you have a piece you want to share? And then back to Nicole.
Just happen to have one.
I thought you might.
What do you know? This is called O Longing My Light. Down the last long nights toward the winter solstice, a way opens through the dark, lit by longing that gleams, a path that is hope for a path. This wound is not a flaw, but a gift. My hunger not for mourning, not again, but at last. A changed creation, a being only hinted at. In the dense solitude that heals its arms around me, I am not alone. The mystery draws me closer, pulls me forward. Oh, darkness, how could you want me so? Oh, silence, how can you enfold me, consume me with such tender delight? Oh, longing, by what grace are you my light in this world? By what grace am I yours? This silence in me, another's voice. Oh, hope, dawn rising in me, how is it you shine brighter the deeper my yearning? My tears like stars in the night. How is it my merest prayers, near despair, are your birth?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank God.
So good. Yeah, thank God too. Nicole.
Thanks to both of you for this conversation and all of you for your presence this midday. I want to just share a couple ways in which you can continue to journey with the BTS Center. One of those is coming up later this week, and I'm just going to pull up the image from our website. The offering is called Stories of Grief and Courage. I was prepping with Hannah and Anu earlier this week. These are both emerging leaders in the global church, and we're going to have a conversation about the way in which honoring grief and lament leads to courage. So I invite you to join us on Thursday for that event. Also coming up, for those of you who are interested in sticking with us on spiritual leadership in a climate changed world, we have two courses that are coming up in 2022. One is in partnership with the School of Global Citizenry called Wilderness, called Wildness and Spirituality for the Common Good. And the other is in partnership with the Maine School of Ministry, Spiritual Leadership for a Climate Changed World. So if you would love to spend a few weeks with us, my colleague Aram will be leading both of these courses, and we would love to see you there. I'll also say that we are deep in planning for a Martin Luther King Day offering called Committed to Listen. And you'll be seeing more about that in our newsletters. And I think there may be another fireside chat or two coming up before we need to turn our fireplaces into warm weather mode. So you can look forward to hearing more about who else Alan will be having this style of conversation with.
Thank you, Nicole. So as I mentioned, Steve's going to linger a little bit for some Q&A for those who want to stick around. But before we officially end the formal portion, Steve, do you have a blessing that you could share for those of us who are gathered here?
Sure. Greetings from heaven to you who are favored by God. Do not be afraid. You have found favor with God, and you will conceive and bear forth in your life the love of God made flesh. And that love will create a realm that will have no end. You will ask, how can this be? I'm just one poor, inadequate little soul. But the Spirit will come upon you. So what is to be born of you will be holy, will be called the love of God, and of its beauty there will be no end.
Amen.
Amen.
May it be so. Yeah. Steve, thanks again for joining us for this conversation today. Thank you for your incredible faithfulness to unfolding light and writing liturgies and music and reminding us of the importance of a walk in the woods. So grateful for this time together. And thank you all for joining us today. We're going to stop the recording and end the Facebook Live, but we'll keep the Zoom meeting open for a bit for those who want to stay for some conversation. So go in peace if you wish, or feel invited to linger for a bit of conversation if you can.